think the moment of clarity came when we started to work with a scientist from Columbia University. I went to New York and sat down and talked to him and said, listen, we're really interested in finding drug interactions that can cause this sudden cardiac death. You know, maybe your model, all this cool work you're doing in big data, maybe your work can be applied to this. What do you think about that? And he said, yeah, that's a great idea, you know, let's do that.
I was curious about this story from the beginning when I first read the press release out of Texas Tech. I was working for the Texas Tribune at the time, and they sent me up to Lubbock to do a short and newsier piece about this. And I think I realized it was going to be an interesting story, or had the potential to be an interesting story, when I talked to a lot of different people, the researchers, doctors treating antibiotic resistance, a principal at a local school, and people in the cattle industry who all had different reactions to this news that antibiotic resistance could be moving in the air around them. So that tension was built in from the beginning, and journalists like tension. In addition to that, there was the science, which I didn't understand at all at that point. So it had the potential for being complex.
There is almost always this moment of a clicking in some sense, where I'm talking to someone and I just never want to stop talking to them because they are so fascinating, and I think that's the moment when I think, I need to write about this entomologist, or this citizen scientist, or this cancer patient, or whoever it is.
As my mother was dying, I was there for the last few days with her constantly, and I was writing down a lot of what was happening, I think just as a way of processing it. And then I just put the notes away and never really wrote anything about it. And it took me several years before I started processing it and wanting to write it into a story. So although I was writing about it at the time it happened, it took me about 5 years to be able to write this essay.
By accident, I saw a talk by Thomas Hales here in New York, and there he talked about how he came up with the proof and how he had trouble publishing it because people couldn't understand the proof because it was so complicated. And so not only did it take him decades to come up with the proof, then it took him even almost as long to convince people that his proof is correct. And in that talk, he talked very emotionally about it and how exhausting it was for him, what a struggle it was for him. And that was really something different. That was, I think I haven't seen scientists talking about their work like that before, and that captivated me, and that made me want to tell the story on the radio.
I've always been fascinated by this amphibian. Their presence remind me of the pre-Hispanic past of my city and my own culture, and the fact that it is about to disappear from its natural environment led me to report the situation in the hope of being able to promote those efforts and raise awareness among the people.
The moment that we realized we had to write this story, first we started digging into the topic of stillbirth and into what happened to our own son. But after a while, we jumped onto things that weren't okay. So we thought, this is not just about our own son, this is not just our story. We have to write a whole story about this.
I realized I wanted to pursue this story when I was driving through River Rouge, Detroit, and got out of my car, and the air immediately smells like rotten eggs and burnt plastic, and that's just completely normal there. You inhale and it's like a spray of gravel in your throat. You can really feel it. And while I was in River Rouge, I met Elizabeth Milton. She's an asthma educator, and she goes door to door trying to teach kids and adults how not to die from their chronic and extreme asthma. And when she told me that no matter what she does, their conditions don't improve because she can't keep them from being exposed to the air, that was just a really heartbreaking moment, and so I continue to work with her.
Our producer, Ivan Bronstad, got a tip that 4 doctors at the Karolinska had made a report, a very solid one, about shortcomings in Paolo Macchiarini's articles. And they've been working with the patients and searching for a solution to their very bad condition. So they were looking into his articles to see, is there a solution to these patients' condition? But what they saw in the articles was a picture that didn't at all reflect reality. The allegations in this report were very, very serious, and for us it was interesting immediately, because if this was true, how could it have happened at the Karolinska Institute and Hospital, which is home for the Nobel Prize?